Aloha, please stay tuned to Island Connections, where we'll be talking about new beginnings for the labor movement in Hawaii. Thank you very much. Aloha and welcome to Island Connections. My name is Brahim Aude, and I'll be the host for this episode. And the episode is sponsored by the Department of Ethnic Studies and also the Information Technology Services Distance Learning Unit of the Technology Services at the University of Hawaii. Tonight's topic will be labor, a new beginning, and we have three guests who will be talking about that particular topic. First, we have Akwan McElrath, and she is a University of Hawaii regent and a staunch supporter of the labor movement, and she has observed that labor movement and worked in it for many, many years as well. We also have Eric Gill from Local 5. He's the financial secretary-treasurer of Local 5 and recently won an election. And also we have Mari Yoshihara from the Department of American Studies. Sorry, I'm from the Department of Ethnic Studies. We have cross-listed courses, yeah. That's why.
I'm glad to know this multidisciplinary.
Yeah, right.
Teaching an ethnic studies course right now.
Yeah. And she's also a new addition to the University of Hawaii Professional Assembly Board.
Yes.
And so welcome to you all. And one of the things I'd like to ask, when we talk about who's got the power, union power, what kind of power and all that kind of stuff. So what does that all mean in the context of what's happening right now with the labor movement? Anyone would like to begin with that?
Well, I think that if you were to assess what's happened to the labor movement over the years, clearly that which provided its strength in agribusiness is no longer here. We've become a service economy, and although we've got a lot of hotels and supermarkets organized, we still do not have a major portion where services are provided and which affect largely women workers. And that's the insurance companies, the banks, the real estate agencies, even an organization such as Hawaii Medical Service Association, for example, which provides services, is not organized. Consequently, one has to look as to where the power lies, and I'm always fascinated that the power truly lies in our ability to vote. Now, I understand that we have a 25% penetration of the workforce in the state of Hawaii, which is over 600,000 people, and 25% of that makes for a very large number of the total population of 1.25. It means that we've got, let's say, 579,100 workers who are employed, and 25% of that means 144,755 in the public and private unions. And I am told that if you were to use a multiplier of 2.5, for example, you would have a potential of 289,550 workers in the labor movement who can vote. This is what, to me, in this day and age, represents political power if we can get all of these 289,550 potential voters to get to the polls so that we don't have to fight the Republicans who introduced, for example, 2 right-to-work bills in the last legislature and force the government workers, for example, to privatize in what, 1 or 2 years, and raise the health plan premiums, and that will take effect in the year 2003. So that much of the social legislation which we enacted in the 1950s, for example, could be wiped off the books. And to me, this is where union power lies today, if we can get our act together.
Yeah, and also like with regard to the labor movement itself, especially the union movement, labor power also means basically more democracy in the unions itself. And you've had recent experience in this. Could you say something about that kind of power that the rank and file has?
Yeah, I think I'd like to kind of take a bank shot off what AQ just said. There is a very substantial and as far as the United States is concerned, I think we're second behind New York in terms of density of union members in the population. So there's no shortage of union voters. The problem has been in the last 20 years that the unions themselves and the union leaderships themselves have grown away from the membership to the point where the members are no longer respecting the union's endorsements the way that they used to. And there's all kind of factors here. There's changes in society. There's changes in the union membership. People are different than they used to be. But ultimately, organizationally and structurally, the unions have relied on other things than the basis of it. A union is a group of working people, and that's what union means, united. So the power of the union comes from a united membership, not from any individual leader or board member, or whether it be whether it be me or the other guy that was running in my race. It's not, the power doesn't devolve from the individual leader, it devolves from the members working together. So that's true both on the shop floor when we're dealing with issues at the workplace. If we have a labor dispute, it's the members on the street that make the difference. And in the voting booth, either the members go out to vote and vote along a single interest and a single program, or they don't. If the members don't vote together, then they cancel each other's votes out. And the union voter becomes no different from anyone else in the population. And the unions are finding out now the hard way what our predecessors in previous generations already knew, that the power of the union comes from the union member, and the union's main task is to organize the membership. And I think that is, you spoke about our recent election, that is exactly the crux of the difficulty, or the dispute, if you will, in our union, in terms of which way are we going to head. Are we going to be an organizing, grassroots, membership-based, committee-based, union that concentrates on organizing our members and leading our members into the fields where they need to fight in their own interests? Or are we going to be a service type of, what is called a business union, where, we collect dues and we're like firemen or something. The problem at the workplace, we go down, we settle it, we go back to the office, wait for the next call. And that's how many unions, including our union, started to slip into that over the last 20 to 30 years. So I think we've grown, I'm not sure grown is the right word, but we've moved away from our roots. We have to move back to our roots. The roots are the members, putting the membership and organizing the membership first, and then utilizing that united membership to struggle on social issues, to vote together at the voting booth, to take action in their own on their own behalf and for the larger community.
Yeah, a recent demonstration of union power was also, we have a segment of tape about 1 minute from the recent rally in March that we had on Labor Day on September 2nd, actually. And so whenever the tape is ready, we can roll it, and we'll have Mari comment on this, and you folks also. Go ahead. Yeah.
Who's got the power? What kind of power?
So, Maury, we see here that there are all kinds of unions involved in this. So could you please comment on this from your perspective?
Yeah, I think what was really powerful about this particular march was that we were able to show not only the strength of our individual unions, but the true unity, collaborative efforts of all these different unions. As we just saw in the clip, there were all these different banners and shirts. There were HSTA shirts, there were ILWU banners, and there were lots of UPA caps. And it's been, I think it's a pretty unique thing that all these different unions, both private and public sector unions, professional unions, as well as so-called blue-collar unions, like really worked together to send a to put the political message back into the labor to the Labor Day event. I think all these different unions do various kinds of Labor Day events like picnics and stuff. But one of the things that we wanted to do with this march is to bring, with issues like voting and all kinds of like really real issues that labor movement is facing. We wanted to bring those kinds of political messages back into the Labor Day event. So I think this was the first of, we effectively launched the first of a series of events that we can kind of go rolling from that.
Yeah, we have, go ahead.
There's an interesting aspect of it, and that is this. Although none of the messages appeared in any of the banners, what happened at the end when we marched around the Ashton Group is an indication of the globalization of capital and the fact that now there is happening all over the world the mergers of many different companies actually to the impoverishment of American workers. In this particular case, the downturn of the Japanese economy meant that the company could not continue making payments on its mortgage. It was sold to a New York group which is in the business of buying off hotels. And so when they then give the management of the hotel to another group, that's when the workers really begin to suffer. And so they fight a legal battle as to who is truly responsible for paying severance, for paying vacation. And yet, at the same time, these were workers who had worked 15, 20, 25 years, and they have a labor fair in order to find new workers, and that is so that they would not have to conform to paying union wages nor to give them union fringe benefits. And this happens every time that there is a merger of companies. All you need do is read the newspapers to see the effects of the global economy, whether it appears in Japan, whether it happens in the Soviet Union, whether it happens in Canada or the United States. Workers pay through the nose simply because all of business is interested in the bottom line, not on what workers can be paid a decent wage, increase the quality of their lives. And to me, this was one of the very basic messages of why we had to march against Ashton.
Yeah. That's very interesting. But also, like, the question of globalization is something that you talked about. Is central to what's going on in terms of change of environment, etc., in which labor has to operate. And if labor does not try to do something different from the earlier years, than from like 2 years ago even, then, we're going to be clobbered again, you see. So any comments on this, Eric?
Yeah, I think in regards to the Aston situation, first of all, Aston is a management firm. They do own some hotels, but they are primarily a management firm that works for other owners. And in this case, Aston was picked by this owner as I'm speculating, but I think we have some good evidence on that. They are testing the resistance of the labor movement on whether or not we're going to be able to effectively defend the standards of living and the standards of work, the standards of compensation, the medical standards, and so on, that we have built up over the last 50 years. And what Aston did here, in essence, was chuck out the entire contract, chuck out the people, not pay the contractual benefits that were provided, and basically saying, well, it's not us, it's Otaka that didn't pay. And on the other hand, you can contrast that from when Otaka entered the Hawaii market. Otaka was one of a number of Japanese corporations that invested heavily in the 80s, and Otaka bought a number of hotels in Hawaii, and including the Hawaiian Regent, which is now Marriott. That's represented by Local 5. This one that is now the Aston, which is represented by the LW, and a couple on the neighbor islands, which are LW hotels as well. Otaka hired everybody. They assumed the contract. They assumed the obligation for the years of service, the accumulation of vacation, sick leave, and so on. They assumed the banks, for sick leave, vacation, and they basically came into Hawaii and said, "We're here to stay. We want to work with the community." Now they're being forced to sell, and at prices far lower than they paid, and these sharks, in essence, these investment sharks, like the one that apparently is the one that bought this, what is now the Aston, are coming in here, and they're testing the water. They want to see how much money they can make off of us. And so here we are in a situation where the government has not done anything to protect our standards of living here. The government hasn't done anything. If anything, the courts in this situation may have not done something they could have. I'm not familiar because it's not our case. But in essence, this bankruptcy that Otaka was faced with has resulted in a big diminution of standards. And what they're trying to do is break the union. Now, they picked on Aston, I think, because it was ILW's only hotel in Waikiki, and they thought that they could basically pick on this bargaining unit in isolation, and that ILW would not be able to marshal the forces on the street to effectively fight that. At Local 5, we saw that. We do have the forces in Waikiki, and we're very aware that what is happening at Aston is a test case, and that other investors and other potential owners are looking at this to see what's going to happen. We will either defend successfully our standard of living here, or the unions will be severely weakened, and the entire community will suffer. Because if you look at tourism as its economic impact on Hawaii, of course it's a very important industry for us. But when you look at it, the money that stays here in Hawaii from tourism is what goes into our members' pockets. So if the union can't deliver the paycheck, if the union can't deliver a good medical plan, if the union can't deliver these things for local working people, the whole economy is going to be affected and to sink down here. Tax revenues will be off. That'll affect everything from the university to garbage collection, right? Small businesses will suffer as workers don't have the money to patronize or to buy things that they need. The welfare rolls will increase. The public assistance burden will increase. So, we are here defending Hawaii. We're not just talking union here. Yeah. We are, in fact, the unions are the vehicle and the tool for local working people to defend our economy. And not only for working people's sake. Professionals and business people also rely on this. And so when we talk about fighting globalization, what we're talking about here is, we're a small community out in the middle of the Pacific. And these guys have our beaches. They have our beaches, they have sewer lines, police protection, roads, maintenance, everything in Waikiki has all been put in by the community. We have, as a community, we have extended our welcome to these corporations, and this is what they're doing. So I think it's important to understand that we're not just talking union here. The unions are a key part of our community, and without the unions, we will have no defense against global predators.
Yeah, the unions are defending not only themselves, but Hawaii as well. So we have a couple of things. We have a tape that we would like to show also. It's an interview with another professor from American Studies who's been active in UPA for a while and also in other labor issues in Hawaii as well. I would like to show the tape and then ask Maury to comment on the tape itself and also other things regarding globalization. Okay, if the tape is ready, we can roll.
The way unions oftentimes work is all of the members or the faculty or the teachers or whatever, they pay their dues, and then the people they hire as staff do the negotiating and everything on their behalf. And so there's no real involvement by the membership. And that may have worked in Hawaii in the past, but with the governor taking a pretty hard line against public sector unions and the legislature starting to do that as well, it's probably not going to work in the future. And if you don't draw on really the only power that unions have, which is the power of their collective political force, then you're going to get squashed. So, I mean, I think if UPA members, if faculty members want to have a better university and a better contract, they'll have to get involved. More idealistically, I think when you have people involved, you get a better union, a more democratic union. It's more accountable to its members, more accurately represents their interests, and has closer ties to the community. Hawaii has, I think, in some ways, a stronger labor tradition, a more healthy union movement, and a stronger kind of public sector and a more solid social welfare net than most other states. And the anti-union movement is not nearly as vicious in Hawaii as it is in other states, at least in my experience. On the other hand, it seems to me quite clear that if they remember the Great Sugar Strike, rather than trying to organize new hotel workers or new high-tech workers or new informational workers and healthcare workers, then we're going to be in trouble. And if the union movement doesn't represent professionals too, in addition to people who work in factories or clean rooms and hotel rooms and everything else, if we don't kind of stand together to define our own interests as workers and professionals, then we can't expect to be sharing much in the prosperity, as indeed middle-class people haven't shared in the prosperity over the last, this last big economic boom. Middle-class income went down. The number of people in poverty in Hawaii over the last 10 years has gone up, despite one of the biggest economic booms in American history. We can change that, I think, if we come together and demand it. But if we don't, then what we'll hear is a lot more of the same.
Maury, here's a colleague of yours who came out as a rank-and-file leader during the April Caetano strikes, actually. And
one good thing that the strike did was generate a new generation of UPA leaders that were newly mobilized.
And you have also been active, and you're one of those leaders who came up from the strike. So could you comment on what we just heard, because Robert has been talking about what made him start dealing with, the union and working for labor and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So could you comment on that and also on your role?
I think Robert very effectively articulated both the potential that Hawaii's labor movement has in terms of the tradition of strong labor movement historically, as well as the actual obstacles that we have had in kind of realizing the potential. We have a fairly, not enough still, but in terms of percentage of unionized workers in the state, we're doing pretty all right, at least compared to other states in the country. So we have a lot of potential, but both in terms of private versus public sectors, professional unions as opposed to blue-collar unions, there's been lots of divisions based on occupational lines or personal conflicts, etc. And we haven't been able to, we have been less than successful or less than perfect in terms of fostering ties between these different union movements. And so we'd like to work on that both within UPA, sort of raising the labor consciousness among UPA members, as well as working closer with other unions. But as we saw in the case of the march, if we try, we can achieve something. And of course, march is only a small step, but we have a lot of potential. And I think one of the things that people like Robert and myself can do is bring, we're both fairly new faculty members with lots of perhaps naive idealism, and we can sort of jump into this movement and try to do lots more grassroots organizing within the membership, as well as kind of get involved in community activism.
Yeah, perhaps we need that, what you might call naive idealism. But I don't think it's naive, because you guys are smart and you've been doing the right thing also. But the labor movement as part of social movements in Hawaii. And I just want to show something on the Elmo, if we're ready for the Elmo. And this, are we ready for the Elmo? Okay, here it is. This is social process in Hawaii, and this is the ethnic studies story, politics and social movements in Hawaii. So what we try to do is connect the previous period of time in Hawaii's history with regards to social movements, plus what's happening right now up to 1999. So that tells the story of Hawaii's people as well from the ethnic studies perspective. And by the way, AQ, you have an article in there about the labor movement. But actually, we'd like to think about the labor movement in this regard as part of the larger social movement in Hawaii. And in terms of the globalization thing, I might add is that the strikes that happened in April, which I like to call the Caetano strikes, actually are in fact a way in opposition to globalization. So any comments on that, Mari, and then maybe the other guests as well?
Globalization is globalization, therefore it impacts all segments of society. I mean, injury to one is injury to all. I mean, that's why we need to work together in order to fight the negative impact of globalization. But globalization also manifests itself in very localized patterns, localized ways. And so the Caetano strike was a very kind of good manifestation of that.
I think one of the things that we need to take advantage of now in order to solidify the ability of the labor movement to move forward in politics is to capitalize on the very good feeling that the community had for the workers in the public school system and at the university. You received support which probably would not have been true 5 years ago. And what we can do now is to say, all right, we will expand our understanding among other elements of the community, which is always important. I'm alluding to what you had said earlier in the game. And certainly the previous strikes which we have had, which were big ones, we were able to at least galvanize that group of the community which could identify with our demands, either for wages or for job security or for fringe benefits, which people said, well, gee, that should be part of being a worker. Just as, for example, public workers have always been pointed to as having a group of fringe benefits which private workers could never enjoy. And what you did was to capitalize, presumably, on the strength that you had by pressuring the elected officials and saying, look, we are the largest public union in town, and if you don't do this, then we will do that. I think the political picture has changed somewhat.
Yeah.
And labor really needs to take a look at its multiple slates that it passes around and say, is this what really gives us our strength? You know, with a reapportionment, practically every seat is up for grabs. And that's the challenge for the labor movement. The other thing is, what is there in a political action program that makes sense? Not only to union people, but for the community as well. And do we need then to fly all over the lot and say, I'm for this, I'm for that, you're for this, you're for that, and people get thoroughly confused. If you want to galvanize the 25% of the employed, organized staff in the state of Hawaii, multiply it by 3 or 2.5, and get 145,000 people who could turn any election on its head, then it means, as I indicated earlier, we'd better damn well get our act together.
That's good. So we have a tape of Robert's interview. We can continue this and we can have more comments, Eric, on that one. So when the tape is ready, we can go to the rest of the interview. What are your thoughts on the new contract, and what does it say about the professors and the lecturers? Did we win? Did we lose? What are the positives? What are the negatives in that kind of contract?
Even with the raises that are going through, the faculty members and primary and secondary school teachers in Hawaii are egregiously underpaid. If you factor in cost of living, it's 49th or 50th. And it's clear that Hawaii is having a difficult time attracting top-notch researchers and teachers as a result. And this raise is not going to solve that, because it adds up to be about a 2.5% raise each for each of 4 years, which is not even keeping pace with cost of living. So in the one sense, it's a contract that's grossly inadequate and is not really going to solve the problems, at least in my opinion. And it seems like some people at the higher ranks were even more discontented with it. On the other hand, it's a long way beyond what Governor Cayetano offered at the beginning of this process, which was basically a 0% raise. He wanted to have some raise structured into merit pay, which would be entirely defined by the administration, and no raises across the board. So what he offered was a pay cut, and we got a raise. So it was a pretty big victory that only came about by us hitting the streets. People really came together during that strike, and it's enhanced not only the kind of political sense of the campus, but the intellectual environment as well. There's a lot more cross-fertilization, a lot more excitement about new programs and bringing in new people. And a lot of that has to do with people coming together to fight for both for themselves, but also for a better university, and I think really a better future for the state, too.
Yeah. This takes us back to the rally. In your view, is the rally of September 2nd, the Labor Unity March, is it a new beginning for labor,
Yeah.
do you think?
I mean, I thought it was tremendously successful. And actually, I find doing politics in Hawaii tremendously rewarding. In most other states where you have a much more entrenched, ideologically solid anti-union movement, it's very difficult to get people to come out to a Sunday labor march or something unless they've been involved with the union for a long time. Not so in Hawaii. I think people here know more, local people know here more than in other states, that you can't have a functioning democratic society without having a viable labor movement. And so we had tremendous response, but we would have gotten 400 in a lot of other places. So I think there's a sense that, especially now that the economy is starting to go down and people can't just go back to sleep and count on their mutual funds going up all the time, there's a sense that it's going to take that maybe what's best for the Hawaii Hilton Village is not always best for the rest of the people in Hawaii, or what's best for Governor Cayetano may not be the best for the rest of Hawaii. So I think it is a new beginning. It was pretty tremendous. The other thing that was amazing about it is all the people who came together. You know, unemployed hotel workers. Some of them have worked at under $30,000 a year jobs for 28 years, standing together with senior faculty members who might be making $80,000 a year, and articulating together, like, okay, we may have a lot not in common, right? Some of us are doing a lot better off than others, but we have more in common, and we can kind of share a vision for the state.
So, Mari, do you share your colleagues' views on this and
Yeah.
on the contract? And because these are like part of the effects of globalization, what we had to put up with during the strike and so on.
Right.
Yeah. So, any other comments on that from your perspective?
Well, I think I agree with Robert that in terms of what we settled in terms of the contract, it accomplished what we struck for, but it was far from being ideal. I mean, there are lots of our members who are not entirely satisfied with what we got. A lot of UPA members feel that we actually lost as a result of the strike. So the union would have to deal with that, and we're going to be coming up with the next round of negotiations very soon. In fact, we really have to start working now. So we have to we have to look at the contract we got, and we have to really strategize for our next round of negotiations.
And not to mention that the Hawaii State Teachers Association are still
Right.
without a contract.
Uh-huh.
I mean, somebody did a number on them. I don't know who, but
Right.
we can all guess who.
Yeah, so
But-
what's happening with HSDA suggests that these are not isolated issues, but
Yeah.
they're more structural issues and political issues, as well as a moral issue about how the state values education and working families in Hawaii.
Yeah. Eric, in terms of that kind of labor unity and so on, so what does that say again, with regard to fighting globalization and so on?
Well, I'd like to make some observations on what both Robert and Mari have said. first of all, I feel a lot of kinship. I was an ethnic studies program participant some years ago, more than I care to think, and went directly from university into the union, as did a number of others that are now in important leadership roles in various unions. There is no difference really between the union movement and the movement of Hawaii's people, if you will, ethnic movement. Unions started with ethnic unions. You had a Japanese union and a Filipino union on the plantations, for example, and over many years of struggle, they learned the hard way that the only way to succeed was by creating a unified force of people from all walks of life. And here what I see is a new crop of labor leaders being spun out of this university. And frankly, even if you lost the strike, and even if you had actually taken economic losses out of this strike, the fact that you now have churned out a new group, a new, and I won't say naive. I think idealism is also the wrong word. I think it's a question of socially committed. In other words, you know, UPA is now turning out a group that in essence put together that rally without institutional help from the labor movement, and in fact it kind of grafted it onto what the labor movement institutionally had done, was a big concert which had very little political content. So here we have a situation where grassroots energy is coming out, and grassroots leaders are coming forward as the struggle is fought. And the fact that the leaders are in place has a huge impact, because a couple of young people that nobody ever heard of before got a whole bunch of unions to put together their energies together. And I think what it is it's kind of an indication of where the labor movement is at. We had strong roots in the grassroots movement, in Hawaii's national movement, if you will, where the strongest of the local activists, fighting for social justice and for social change, grafted on and became part of the unions because that was the effective tool. And then as now, it is an effective tool. And then as now, new leaders are coming forward and becoming part of the unions. And then as now, that is the key, because the membership is out there waiting. The members want to fight for a better life. The members want a strong education system that will provide a future for their kids. The members want good medical, a strong retirement. Working people want these things. But without good leaders, and I'm not talking about the heads of the unions, guys sitting in the office with the ties. I'm talking about people in the grassroots in the base, right there with them. Without a sufficient crop of those leaders, we will never be able to make use of our numbers. It's like an army with generals but no sergeants. And so I'm very encouraged by what's happened here coming out of this Cayetano strike, if you will, because no matter what else happens, it's already benefited the future of this labor movement. And all I can say is we have to replicate that all over the place. Yeah. Unions have to take up the causes that made us relevant in the past and recover those things and churn out a new generation of leaders, organize, train them, put them in place, and that's going to create the conditions for the members to work together.
Yeah, in fact, UPA has produced more people. In fact, we have one other tape interview of another faculty member who has been pretty active in the strike and also in the labor rally and so on. So whenever the tape is ready, we can roll the tape.
After the strike, the settlement, for me, it was good. For some union members, particularly on the higher end of the pay scale, they weren't happy with the flat amount in the first year. But I think that's very progressive. Of course, I'm a lower paid employee, so. But all in all, I was happy with the union. I was enthusiastic about the strike, and I think it had a good result. I am in agreement with the concept of merit pay because I think it's important for there to be a positive reinforcement mechanism in place to inspire employees to do better. not merely some kind of punitive measures to, discipline them or punish them for not performing so well. So in the abstract, merit pay is a very good idea. However, on this campus, who is going to be the arbiter of merit? The dean? Well, that's a very sensitive spot for a dean to be in. He chooses this person and not that person. Our peers by committee, that's even more awkward. How is the committee going to decide in our college who gets more and who gets less? So I think that the mechanism for determining merit, the criteria for merit and so forth, are still in flux, and for us to be going ahead with it at this point is a little bit hard.
On September 2nd, that's Sunday, and there was a rally as well. So why was it important for you to take part in these kinds of activities?
Well, I suppose that has to do with the way I was raised. I was raised to think that the labor movement was valuable, valid, despite the depredations of a few union leaders, the infamous machinations of Hoffa and company. Basically, culturally speaking, I was taught, through singing so many Pete Seeger songs when I was little, that it's important for union members to hang together and to support other unions. And so I just thought I was willing, first of all, to express my gratitude to UPA for having done a good job during our strike, and I like the idea of coming out in support of ILWU. I think it's very important that we remember that we as intellectuals, as workers in the teaching profession, remember the history of the labor movement and how important it was to the shaping of our country and to education in this country. And that's one thing I think could have been done a little bit better at the Labor March, would be, or at future gatherings, future rallies of this kind, is to let everyone know not just that we're excited about what's happening this time, this minute, that we should go and protest at Aston, but to help make everyone aware of where we came from. I think that so much of it has been lost. I don't know very much about it, but at least I know a little bit about the history of unions and how important they are, and I think we could all, the union could help us learn more.
Well, IQ, I mean, this is the University of Hawaii, lecturer there, and I'm a professor, and she's a professor, and Robert. So, what are your views on the contract and also on the that kind of labor action that?
Well, it seems to me that one of the things we really need to purvey is that, as he indicated, labor has played a very important role in bringing public education to this nation. And here on a local basis, I don't think many people realize that it was through our political action that we are one of, 30-odd states that does not have the death penalty. The ILW spearheaded it. We are one of the very few states that first got into allowing women abortion rights. Many states couldn't even think about it. We had increased all of the benefits of workers' compensation, unemployment insurance. We are one of 7 states that enacted a temporary disability insurance law for those people who become ill or hurt off the job. There are many other things that have occurred. Hawaii's prepaid health plan, for example. And I don't know whether the public workers realize that it was the ILWU and unions in the private industry who made sure that the law was passed in the early 70s to allow public workers to organize into unions. So it's a matter of maybe this is a quid pro quo. I'm not putting it quite that way, mind you, but it's interesting, and I think we need to take a look at what kinds of things can we do in beefing up the curriculum of the public schools. What is there that we can do, for example, to save our environment by making coalitions and collaborative efforts with environmental groups. And as you know, trade unions have been very wary about it. As a matter of fact, the Teamsters are all for digging in the Arctic area that Bush wants to dig into. And those are, I think, some of the future areas. And the very basic one, however, is to consolidate the gains that we have made, protect them, because there is no doubt that if the elections go the way they have been, and if we don't get our act together, the Republicans can, in fact, even under reapportionment, take over both the House and the Senate. The gains that they made in the last election were tremendous. And all you need do is go to sessions and listen to these people talk. As a matter of fact, I am appalled that the Democratic members behave as though they were ashamed of the things that they did in the past. And they're all stumbling over each other, trying to behave like a Republican.
Yeah.
I think the old saying is there's two things that politicians want. One is to get elected, and the other is to get reelected. And
That's a good one.
and coming from a family that includes a number of politicians, I think that regardless of ideology, any politician is going to look at election results. And the fact is that unions have not effectively projected the power that comes with the membership block that we hold. And that's because we haven't done enough to solidify that. I think that's a debate going on right now in the labor movement here in Hawaii and across the nation. And our union across the nation has been kind of pace-setting the labor movement in many cities. For example, Los Angeles, where historically the labor movement very weak. And HERE, the hotel and restaurant workers in LA, are pace-setting it and have substantially turned that around politically a lot. And it comes from the same reason that we can get people out for a rally. And the same way you get people out for a rally, you get a nice, talented, not idealistic, but motivated leader, go and talk to the people, explain why it's in their interest. Let's all come out together. Together we can do more than we could by ourselves. And it comes down in practice to stuff like, will unions share lists of members? Will we overcome our distrust of each other? If I send my crew through Waipahu pounding on doors on election day, it doesn't make any sense for 3 unions to go through the same neighborhood. We should build a group, and we should share our list for the day, and we should walk through the neighborhood, tap on the door, have some vans in the way. We'll take you down to the voting booth. Grassroots is where it's at.
Right.
If we can project that,
That would be good, yeah.
Democrats and Republicans are going to become pro-union real quick.
Yeah, but this will talk also to the question of whether we're going to have a new beginning for labor, but also like to show that we have, at the university, more people who are active in the labor movement and who are motivated and, very supportive of other unions, etc. We have a tape of the chair of the Department of Ethnic Studies, and whenever the tape is ready, we can show it. Tape ready?
Well, I think the strike invigorated definitely the membership. For the first time, a lot more of the members of the board were involved in the various islands and so on. So going from a more passive period to a much more involved period, of course, during the strike. Now, there are a number of things that I think the union will try to do. Traditionally, they've been involved in lobbying the legislature. I think the strike showed we need to do outreach, a lot more active outreach, both among the students to explain the side of the faculty and develop stronger ties with the students. They also have to go out to the community and more especially do a lot more coalition work with other unions that share pretty much the same basic interest in labor issues.
You've been active in the labor movement for many years, and not only public unions, but ILWU and others. It would be interesting to know about your assessment of the labor movement currently and the lessons drawn by labor from the Cayetano strikes in April.
I think coming out of the strike and working in an effort to build solidarity with the HSTA, because UPA, we learned that UPA by itself, could have never made some of the gains or have gone as far as we would have been able to without going in tandem with the HSTA. So those kind of things in terms of tactics are big lessons. The other is that we can't rely solely on the Democratic Party, even though we may have a few friends holding key positions in the legislature, like Roy Takumi, who's a friend, he's a higher ed chair, and a number of the other folks, that we have to build our own independent base of support and should not be afraid to exercise whatever political muscle that we have as a union. And we can only do that if we act solidly as one voice with other parts of the labor movement. So I think, especially with the newer, younger members of the union, there's an effort to establish that more independent voice. I think in our classes, because in the history of the people in Hawaii, especially immigrants, the plantation legacy allows us to be able to share with our students the history of struggle, the role that unions have played in the struggle against injustice and for social change. So I think in that sense, we can, in our curriculum, we are able to educate the students that unions are not the bad guys the way they're depicted in public. And then in real life, students will eventually become workers. So by getting students to participate or to be sympathetic to what's going on today, like some of the strikes or efforts to organize, and even a few of them will join the management, that they have to understand unions as our main message in the rally make up an important part of the community. They're an integral part of the community. They pay taxes as well, and they live in our neighborhoods, and we go to school and share a lot of the same agony and, quote, ecstasy of what it means to live here. So that sense of solidarity, we used to call, class consciousness, we need to continue to impart to our students today.
Yeah, we still have a few minutes left, but before that we go to the set, I would like to show a few pictures from the labor rally. Here's one of our leaders, Eric. He's really leading the march and chants and so on. And here we have John Husted. She's from the Hawaii State Teachers Association. She was also in the rally, and she gave a talk and she marched with us. And here's again the Aston workers supported by the rest of the labor rally from different unions. And here striking workers and one supporter and their kids also from at the Aston Beach Hotel. So I just wanted to show this to show that kind of solidarity. We have also a question from a caller, actually, to Eric on mandatory overtime. Why did the union negotiate mandatory overtime for workers, forcing them to work on their day off? And this is Mike in Liliha. So just to answer that briefly so we can talk also about the other things.
Hi, Mike. I'm sure Mike works at Hilton Hawaiian Village. We did not negotiate mandatory overtime. In fact, we are now making plans on how we are going to address that question, and we're going to do so in a militant and uncompromising fashion. What happened at Hilton Hawaiian Village is they built a new tower that opened up earlier this year, added 540 some odd rooms and hired no new workers. They had a hiring freeze even after they had a hiring hall. And Hilton has, for whatever reason, determined that it's to their advantage to work our members to death over there. Mandatory overtime is not in the contract. We did not negotiate that. The company is taking the position that since we negotiate overtime language, and therefore since the company has the right to assign schedules, and since schedules in excess of 40 hours or over 8 hours a day and that sort of thing are overtime, that the union has acquiesced. That is not the case. We also have language in our contract about 2 days off a week. So we're going to enforce that, and this is something that we have to put on the table for negotiations coming up as well. We didn't negotiate mandatory overtime, and we will be fighting it. There are some legal complications, but it's an important issue, especially at Hilton.
Yeah.
One of the important things about mandatory overtime is that the bosses are getting away with murder rather than hiring new workers and paying them union conditioned wages and fringe benefits. They'd rather work an incumbent worker to death. I mean, it's very obvious.
The benefit load is driving it. You know, the cost of medical, pension, so on, you know, it's probably cheaper for the company to pay time and a half on the wage line and not have to pay another medical.
Absolutely.
We have a few more questions actually from callers, but I think we have time for one. Whoever wants to take it, maybe Maury and AQ. What is privatization and why is it not good for the workers in Hawaii? Do you agree with that?
In every privatized industry, we have found that they have not, if there were a union contract, they have never ever followed the union contract. They can work out their own conditions of work. They can fight the organizing of a union when you privatize. I mean, it's that obvious. Privatization works to the benefit of the employer. He makes the money. He's concerned about the bottom line. He's not going to pay decent wages to his workers.
Okay, so we got to wrap it up. I thank our viewers and I thank our guests for a good discussion and a very interesting one. And I hope it'll be a beginning, new beginning for the labor movement in Hawaii. Thank you very much.